Riverside.
Oh, we are ready to rumble, Mr. White.
Angel.
It's good to be here. Better all the way, because we have Kate Gilchrist joining us in the studio.
Yes, we do.
So wonderful to have you on board, Kate.
Thanks for having me. Incredibly excited to be asked onto your podcast. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
We are a big deal. I'm glad that you realise that.
I know. That's why I've been so excited.
I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm going to tell everyone about the awesome Kate. So she went to primary school at Beaumaris North. Have I said that right?
Beaumaris North.
Beaumaris North. Fantastic. And then she started at St. Leonard's when in grade 4, and that school goes all the way up to the end of school. So the secondary school that she went to was also St. Leonard's. She is a very learned lady, is our Kate Gilchrist. She went to Victoria University, where she did a Bachelor of Applied Science in PE. Fellow PE teacher here. Well done. And then she went to Melbourne Uni to get her Diploma of Ed. And then she also at Melbourne Uni has done her Masters of Education in Student Wellbeing. And we're looking forward to getting into all things student wellbeing with you today. Mr. White, tell us a bit more about Kate.
Love to. Kate is a passionate advocate for young people and supporting them to be the best versions of themselves. And she provides a non-judgmental, positive and supporting environment. She has always been interested in understanding adolescent behaviour and providing them with the tools to manage the demands of living in a complex world, particularly around the use of social media, which is something that I want to get into tonight. This is the foundation of her work, the teaching knowledge sitting on top of the well-being of the students. Her work is always with the student in the middle of the thinking. And Kate also, as a human, loves to laugh and finding light in any situation. And I love this. She spends her waking hours panning for gold, trying to find the good in situations and working at containing negative bias. I have worked with Kate and I continue to work with Kate, and I can speak from first-hand experience that panning for gold is such a brilliant mindset to have, but I digress. Welcome to the podcast, Kate. It's great to have you on.
Thank you so much.
They love you, Kate. They
do.
love you, but we don't have time for the crowd because we got to get into business.
I liked the crowd though.
Sorry. Well, here. Put it down. And they love you, Kate. All right. You are fabulous, and I want to know. So, who is the teacher that has positively impacted your life?
I have to say I had such an incredible experience through my schooling, and when my parents put me in at St. Leonard's, I never really realised how incredible that environment was going to be for me. But there were two teachers in particular. I mean, I'm a phys ed teacher. Helen Wilson was just such an incredible role model. She was my phys ed teacher, but I also played a lot of hockey when I was at school, amongst everything else. And Helen just guided me, supported me. She was incredibly positive herself. She was a wonderful role model. And I've managed to stay in contact with Helen all of these years after school, just on social media, which has been phenomenal. And Helen is no doubt a big part of the reason why I did decide to pursue a career as a phys ed teacher, amongst other things. And then the other teacher for me was Alan Ross, and he was deputy principal at St. Leonard's when I was there. And when I was 12, I've got a twin sister. We lost our mum really suddenly. And I still remember sitting in the Year 7 classroom on the first day of Year 7, and mum had died in that Christmas holiday period. And he came knocking on the door to check in on us to see how we were. And obviously I still remember to this very day. And I had him as a teacher. I studied politics. Believe it or not, Mr. White, I studied politics. And Alan Ross was the politics teacher. And he was just so inspiring. He was so interactive. He was a really remarkable, caring, supportive teacher.
Obviously left a very, very, very strong mark. And do you feel like, like what a pivotal time, like to be 12 and to lose your mum when we all know working with teenagers how difficult that time without a tragedy like that to occur. So to have somebody to help you to navigate through that is just beautiful. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you think that do you think when you first got into teaching, do you think you were on the lookout for that with kids? Do you think that you have been that teacher for other students?
Yeah, an amazing question. I think that you can, in those kinds of traumatic experiences, you can end up in a really negative downward spiral. But I've gone on, which it kind of probably sounds a little bit strange, but I've gone on to see all of the lessons that I learned from that experience in losing a parent. And I suppose for me, it helped to put perspective on things for me and to understand the fragility of our lives as well. And I knew when I was in year 10 that I wanted to be a teacher. And having had that experience around mum and the resilience that I had to develop as a young person, and even now as an adult, I think we're constantly juggling the challenges of our lives. And I think about obviously the young people that we get to look after, they're constantly juggling these difficulties in their lives. We have to find the goodness in things, and we have to be able to support these young people to be the best versions of themselves and let them fall, but have that safety net so that we are there to pick them up. And I've certainly used my experiences to be able to support other students who have lost parents as an example or loved ones, because I've lived it, I've experienced it, and it's been challenging for me to do that, but I've anchored off those experiences that I had to be able to do that.
It sounds like anchored in a really positive way. Like you said before, you're right. You kind of come to a crossroads there. Difficult time in a life. Like being 12 is hard. You couldn't pay me enough money to go back and be 12. And yeah, so you can kind of look both ways there, and you would have had a good reason to have gone off the rails and seen the worst in the world, most definitely. And we often do see that. So. Why do you think you looked left rather than right?
Yeah, I've often wondered that myself. I think that when I got into teaching, I knew straight away that building relationships with young people was something that it came naturally to me. I was really invested in as well. And so that sort of became the basis of the work that I did. And I sort of eventually, as you get older, you unpack that traumatic experience. And I think in some ways now I feel quite fortunate that I had that experience. Again, how strange that sounds, because it's given me the skills to be able to support young people. And as a young teacher, I figured out pretty quickly that if these young people weren't functioning very well themselves within their own lives, then nothing else was going to fall into place for them. And so, I spent every day of my working career as a teacher in just providing a safe place for these young people to land, and to provide a non-judgmental, open environment, but pan for gold, try and teach them that this stuff happens to us. It does. We can let it define us if we want to, but we don't have to. We can learn from the experiences, grab the good stuff from them, try and remove the bad stuff, and continue to look for the goodness that's happening around us, because it is. And sometimes it's hard to see, but it's there. It is there if we look hard enough.
It's such a good metaphor. I really like the idea of, if you go, I've thought about that a lot since speaking with you last year, and just as an English teacher, the imagery of that and getting rid of all the murky water and the darkness and all the crap and all the, literally the murky water to find those little nuggets of shiny happiness. And then to make the conscious decision to focus on that, to keep that and throw the rest away. I think it really does work. And where did you get that? Where did that phrase come? Is that a Gilchrist original, or did you...
I wish it was, Will, but it's not. I mean, Mr. White. It's not. So I formalised my training, as you said at the start, by doing a Master of Education in student wellbeing. But part of that, I realised that I have a strong interest in the positive psychology space. And so one of my sort of role models in that space was John Hendry, who was the director of wellbeing pastoral care, they used to call it, at Geelong Grammar. And Geelong Grammar paid all of this money to get Martin Seligman out here to implement his positive education theories. So I've done quite a few positive psychology seminars and you know, anything that I can read, listen to, I've always shown interest in. So I just grab the good stuff and bring it into the school for hopefully other people to grab the good stuff as well. And that's where it came from, the panning for gold.
Yeah. And you definitely do that, like it, and you know what you went through when you were younger. The positive of that is that you are not only in a good place yourself, but you're sharing that with everyone that you meet and everyone you work with at school. It's wonderful.
I try to. I think the other part of it though is and I wish all young people understood this concept of this negativity bias, that our brains are wired to see the horrible things. You know, if I gave you guys 1,000 compliments and gave you one negative, what would you attach to? And, you know, our young people are so wired like that. And if they could only understand that survival instinct, that fight, flight, freeze response, that if we had more awareness around this is how I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling, I need to, you know, maybe shift that a little bit. And it's not to say I don't have a negativity bias. I absolutely do. But I choose to
actively work against it every day. You're acknowledging it, and you are consciously working against it each day to reprogram your thinking.
Absolutely. And it's hard, but if you've got awareness around it, then it gets easier the more you practice it.
100%. Yeah.
And so when I was asked to come on this podcast, I'm like, why are they asking me to come on this podcast? Because for me, it's just become a normal way of how I operate as a human.
But surely you see around you that you're the gold that has been panned for. That this isn't actually just a
normal.
given.
It's not normal.
It's not a typical behavior, and it is something that we need to name and we need to actively share and challenge people's thinking on, and keep on bringing it to their attention. So the thing that you said before, Kate, when you said that it was a good thing that happened to you, then that is the most positively framed thing I've ever heard. And but it makes so much sense, because you had no control over that. So by you saying that doesn't mean that you wanted that to happen. But what you've realized is you had no control over that happening to you. So you've turned that thing that that really bad thing that you had no control over and that you didn't want to happen into like fueling your life and fueling the direction of your life and how you live your life. That's so powerful. That is powerful, powerful stuff.
It is. I mean, it's taken me a long time to even understand that, because when you're in that moment and you're that young and you're going day by day, you don't understand it. So it's taken me a long time to get to that point.
Yeah.
But, you know, the way that I see it, I wake up in the morning and I've got a choice. I can choose to wallow in self-pity and focus on all the horribleness that's going on around me and to me, or I can make a choice and not be like that and have a laugh. You know, Mr. White knows any opportunity that I can have to play a game, to have a giggle, you know, all of that stuff is really, really important in building connections with other people, in role modelling these behaviours to the young people that we're looking after as well. And that's really important for me. I live, eat and breathe. Everything that I'm saying, you know, I live, eat and I breathe it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's important for me.
This totally connects with what Whitey and I talk about all the time with spiraling upwards, and you know that negativity bias. That if particularly teachers are really good at this, teachers are exceptional at sharing a problem and then bonding over that problem, and then let's all. I want to be in this group, and I want to be helping this teacher out. So I'm going to tell them something. Well, I'm going to tell them something bad that happened to me too, because I want to be part of this. I want to be part of the team.
Yeah.
And then we start spiraling downwards in the attempt to connect with others. And so we talk about actively spiraling upwards. So what are we actively doing to overcome that, to try to actively make the conversation positive and kind of life enriching, as opposed to where without taking any action on it, it will, because we are survival creatures, it will be looking for danger, noticing all the bad things around us so that we can stay alive. So we've got to bring to our attention the really, really good stuff.
We do. And I think as teachers, you know, I often find myself in the middle of those kinds of conversations. And we have a choice as to what we're feeding into those conversations.
Yeah.
And whether or not we're actually sitting in and present in those conversations, or whether or not we're going to try and make a fast exit.
Yeah.
Or not feed, you know, that type of conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, let's face it, teaching's become so incredibly complex and so incredibly challenging, particularly with, you know, the devices that our young people are using amongst everything else that goes on as a teacher. And we just have to make these choices to make our lives a little bit lighter, brighter and breezier.
Yeah.
As often as we can, I think.
That's
Definitely,
right.
definitely. Let's drill down a little bit on that if we can. So, how hard is it to teach students about the dangers of social media in relation to, you know, what we were just talking about, that idea of trying to focus on the positives and trying to push away the negatives? I mean, social media throws things in students' faces all the time, everyone's faces all the time. Not all of it's positive. In fact, I would argue a lot of it is negative. And I wanted to give the idea that I heard a really good saying the other day. She was, comparison is the thief of happiness. And that made me think of social media. So how can we teach these students, these kids to, you know, focus on the positive all the time, Gilly?
Look, I think that's really challenging, and that's why we're in the middle of what we're experiencing as teachers with our young people, and not to mention the parents who are trying to manage what their young people are doing at home on these devices. You know, I would probably have 2 or 3 conversations every week with parents of the students that are in my direct care around, you know, how to best manage their daughters' social media habits at home, use of mobile phone. I think in schools in particular, there have to be really tight policies around what is happening with the use of mobile phones. And I'm hoping to have an opportunity to talk a little bit about Jonathan Haidt's work in this space and The Anxious Generation, the book that he launched last year. I think that in schools, all we can do is raise awareness around some of the dangers associated with the different social media platforms that our young people are using. I mean, some of the statistics are frightening in around our young people accessing things like pornography when they're in primary school. You know, back in my day, I'm so glad that I didn't even know what pornography was probably until I was 25. Let's face it. So it's fraught with so many issues, and as adults, we've got to put clear structures and boundaries around it. And part of that at schools is having policies that say no mobile phones from 8:30 in the morning or whenever class starts until the other end of the school day. That's, I think, really important. And Jonathan Haidt's talking about that. He's talking about people up until the age of 16 should not have access to smartphones.
How much of the issue is, you know, there's obviously a lot of creep for the responsibilities of schools and teachers now, and it's almost like we have to teach the parents
Yeah.
as well about this stuff. Do you have an opinion on how we do that, or whether we should do that?
Look, I think that we all need to see that we're working toward the common good of our young people, and as you mentioned in my bio, and all of my work, all of the conversations that I have, has the student at the very centre of those conversations. And again, my conversations with any of the parents is about saying, well, we're a team and we have to work collaboratively in around to ensure the safety of the students so that they can, we can get to their potential by the end of it all. So I absolutely think we need to keep the conversation open with parents. I think the hard part in schools is that we often run these evening sessions, as an example. We bring an expert in and we get about 20 parents turn up, instead of getting 200 parents. And the 20 that turn up are the ones you don't need to speak to because they're doing all the right stuff. It's the other people that we need to get there that we don't capture. So I think that's the other challenging part of the environment that we're sitting in, is capturing, as many parents as we can to understand some of this work. And look, I'm, since having read Jonathan Haidt's work and his book, The Anxious Generation, I will talk to anybody who will listen to me about this stuff.
I'm tipping you've read it more than once. I saw a copy of it the other day in your office, and it was dog-eared. And then when you told me it came out last year, I could not believe. Look at it. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've got to we need to communicate in all ways, and it's incredibly complicated. These parents of this generation, no other parent group have ever had to navigate this. And so they're doing something for the first time, and it feels complicated because it's enormously complicated. And I think as teachers, we could absolve ourselves of the responsibility. It shouldn't be our responsibility. We could say that, but we are a part of it. We're going to have to be a part of this solution, because we have the parents' trust, we have the trust of the kids. We're an important adult, where it takes a village to raise a child, and definitely to educate a child. So we do have to lean into this and have a voice and have an opinion, because if we don't have an opinion now, then what has happened to this generation? This research from Jonathan Haidt only was released in the last year, so we could kind of anecdotally see how dangerous, see the effects, but we didn't really have the data. And now the data is coming out, and the suicide rates, and the and it's frankly terrifying. Yeah, and it's real. And we do know what is leading to this and creating this. So it's going to take a lot of voices, and for us to actually be able to implement all of his suggestions that he has in there, to hopefully stop the next generation of kids coming through, of which my kid's one of them. And I want. I've never been more relieved that he's not 5 years older, because I could have been convinced to have given him the phone and the access to social media before the data was there. But now I've been able to have a logical conversation with him, saying, no, mate, I love you too much for this, and what we know about your brain is your brain can't handle this, and it's and I don't want to open up those doors, and it will change your life, and not in a good way. So because I love you, the answer is going to be no until you're 16. Yeah. But that would have been really hard 5 years ago, possibly even impossible for me, even as an educator who knows some stuff and has seen seen some stuff. So it's complicated stuff.
Yeah, it really is. I have to tell you what I did do with the year 11s at the start of the year. So I actually presented some of Jonathan Haidt's research to them, and I said to them, no mobile phones in the classroom, not even in your pockets. The attention fragmentation that he talks about, if they've got a phone in their pocket and it beeps or tweets or whatever it does, the attention goes from where it should be, whether it's straight down to the mobile phone.
What's going on? What am I missing out on? It's hyper focused then on whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. How many
And
times a
then,
day does that happen? How many times a day? Because there's a figure that he puts forward, isn't there?
yep, and I can tell you what that figure is. It's around, here
Thought
it
you
is,
might.
it's 192 alerts per day,
That's insane.
and he's actually updated his research since this, and I believe it's now over 200 notifications per day. That equates to 11 notifications per waking hour, or one every 5 minutes.
Mm.
So the other part of the conversation with the Year 11s was in around what it's doing to their sleep. So sleep deprivation. So what we did, please don't laugh at me when I tell you this, I actually did a blind survey, and I asked them with their eyes closed to put their hand up if they have their mobile phone in their bedrooms at night. How many, what percentage do you think put their hands up?
Oh,
So
I think it'll be
80 to 90, 100,
Yeah.
all of them.
I reckon about 95% of students put their hand up. So what we did, we went and bought them an alarm clock.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
And
That's
we
great.
gave them, they were like little $1 alarm clocks for
Is it one
my
of those
kids.
wind-up ones with the bells? Ding, ding,
No, I
ding,
just
ding,
had a couple
no.
of little push buttons on it, nice and user-friendly. So we've
Spectacular.
handed these alarm clocks out to the students and said, get your phone out of your
That's
bedroom,
right.
put it in the kitchen drawer. Here's an alarm. You don't need your phone. Because often you say to the kids, get your phone out of the bedroom. Oh, but I use it for
I
my
have to use
alarm.
it for alarm.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing else that's ever been created. There's no other way for me to wake up.
It's the
Well, back in
only way
my
I can wake
day,
up.
when we used to ride the dinosaurs to school, we used to have these things called an alarm clock. I love it that you gave. So I've had that conversation at least 3,000 times. I've also purchased that alarm clock for my son here because we started that conversation
Awesome.
when he received the phone. But I've never actually gone out and bought everybody an alarm clock. That is next level. I love it. Absolutely love it.
100 alarm clocks we bought.
Love
top
it.
shelf.
That's
That is great.
I probably shouldn't add this, but I have seen a few in the garden around the place, which has been a bit disappointing.
you can't win them all. You can't
Is
win
there a
them all in the
sleeping
first
kid
fight.
next to the bush there?
Yeah.
And
The
there's
other
one
thing.
thing about me, I will keep pushing forward. I will keep
Yep.
pushing forward. I will lock them up.
Do
on
it,
this
do
stuff.
it. The data around the blue light as well, like looking at the phone for 5 minutes before you go to bed has such a detrimental impact on the quality of sleep that you achieve.
Yeah.
And when you wake up in the morning, and the first thing that students would do, adults would do, would grab the phone and look at it again. And this is and you're bombarded with a lot of it at the time, that negative sort of stuff, because you might be looking at the news or whatever, and it's straight away. You don't get any waking moment away from it. So that strategy of keeping it outside the bedroom is not just good for going to sleep. It's also good for waking up, and it gives you that mental space to actually get out of bed, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, do what you need to do, and then if you need to engage. But you've had that little buffer to actually wake up, be human, and then do what you need to do.
And there's a couple of things in that, I think, Will, where we're dealing with this attention fragmentation. They're so connected to these phones. They're addicted to them. And Jonathan Haidt talks about the addictive nature and the dopamine release that these young people are getting. So they're, I watch some of our students, and we have a mobile phone policy from year 7 through to year 10. They're not allowed to access their mobile phones from the start of the day to the end of the day. But our current policy is that year 11s and year 12s can access those phones during the break. And I know that there is a new mobile phone policy sitting in the wings that I'm hopeful will be launched soon, which is no mobile phones from year 7 through to year 12. But I watch our older students walking around with those phones attached to their phones. They are just so addicted to these devices.
And then the young kids are watching them right now and can't wait till they're in grade 11 and 12 to do it. And then if they're at the end of grade 10, well, it's pretty much grade 11, isn't it? So why don't get your knickers in a knot, because next year I'm going to be able to do this. So really, like the justification. It sounds like that's a battle to die on a hill over, definitely.
It is. I was lucky enough to be part of the team that developed the current mobile phone policy, and the thinking around it at the time was that we wanted the older kids to actually develop the appropriate skills to be able to use these devices. But look, I think you throw COVID in the mix and the connection. We were encouraging our young people to remain connected. Well, how could they remain connected during COVID here in Melbourne? They had to be staring into a screen. 2 years of that, and then we get them back into the school environment, and here all of a sudden we're telling them to disconnect and have face-to-face conversations. It's been a really challenging year, a few years for our young people. It really has been. There's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, I forget. I often forget, and I apologise that I often forget about the difference of the Melbourne, the Victorian lockdowns to Queensland, which were quite short in comparison. And okay.
Sorry, I have to laugh at that.
That's an understatement. Yeah.
All right. It sounded like an understatement to me.
Okay. The trauma is still real. I see
the most severe lockdowns in the world in Melbourne.
Like, I know it was. Yeah, I know that in Melbourne was the absolute worst. And I haven't thought about the. I guess I'm seeing it from, well, it's even, we've got to get those phones out of those kids' hands. We've got to have them looking at each other and relearning the art of the human connection. And so I'm in my head, I'm thinking just put in the policy, get the phone out. But yeah, there's going to be a process to that. And I guess that possibly takes time, but it also takes people. The easier thing to do would be to keep the status quo, because the kids will disagree vehemently. They are going to disagree. The parents will back up the kids, because that's going to be the easiest thing. And so the easiest thing is absolutely to maintain the status quo, but that is not the right thing to do. It's not the best thing to do. Yeah.
No, it's not. Yeah. And again, Jonathan Haidt has spoken about the impact that these devices have had on the development of the EQ of our young people, their emotional quotient.
Yes.
They just don't have the people skills, the social skills. He talks about, one of the main skills that adolescents are expected to develop is this executive function, this capacity to self-control, to focus, this ability to resist these off-ramps, and these off-ramps are when the phone pings, I'm off that ramp, I'm doing something else instead of focusing on what I should be doing. So, I really feel like these social media giants should be held accountable around. Anyway, I probably should stop there.
Yeah. Well, and I guess we've got to control our controllables, and I think the government is starting to look at these things and what can we do to protect our young people. But there's also actions that we can take as in our schools as teachers, and having so much influence over parents and students, and that's a really privileged position and a highly influential position to actually even help one student at a time. So even if you bought those 100 alarm clocks and 20 of them ended up in the garden, even if there's 20 kids who have now meticulously are in habits right now as teenagers to get that phone out of the room and are reaping those benefits, they're going to be more likely to be adults that keep on doing that. And hopefully we'll start to curb these really concerning stats that I looked up before, that there's the percentage of people aged 16 to 85 experiencing a mental disorder at some stage in their life. 42.9% of people are likely at the moment to experience some sort of mental disorder in their life. And we know that the phone use is not helping with any of that at all. It's not helping to create those coping mechanisms and strategies to overcome any of those mental illnesses.
Absolutely. And I think that reinforces the importance in our schools with our young people to focus on their well-being. The research is out there. It's telling us that if we have young people that are relatively resilient, that they can roll with the punches a little bit, that they're going to see the academic outcome. So we have to, as teachers, even more so, in today's schools to be focusing on, well, what's happening for the student, and if something's happening, not berating them, actually saying there's something happening for this young person, and what could that be, and what can we do to support them? And if we can put those types of mechanisms in place, which I think we do exceptionally well in the incredible school that I get to work in, we will continue to see our young people achieving their true potential. And that's all I want for them, is to have the very best of opportunities and possibilities to do the things that they want to love and pursue as they grow up.
Have that bright, sparkly future.
Yeah.
All right, tell us and everyone, what should we be reading? What should we be listening to, Kate?
Okay, so this book, go and buy it, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. It is simply sensational. There's some really beautiful chapter summaries. So if you don't like reading a book from start to finish, you can just read the chapter summaries, but there's some brilliant data and statistics in there. And I also wanted to just give a plug to a podcast called The Huberman Lab. I'm sure many of your listeners have heard of The Huberman Lab, but there's a brilliant podcast with Andrew Huberman with Jonathan Haidt as well. So search up that one. It does go for about 2.5 hours, so pop it on in the car as you're driving, wherever you're driving to. It's well worth a listen.
Definitely worth a listen. Definitely worth a listen. In fact, I've listened to it a couple of times now because there's so much that they get into, and to hear those two go at it is, and pull apart the issues and talk the data and talk about the mindfulness and where that the place of technology in our lives. It's wonderful. It really is interesting.
Speaking of wonderful, Kate Gilchrist is an absolute piece of gold. I want to say thank you to Helen Wilson for changing your life as well, and to all the teachers out there who connect in those difficult times when it's sometimes not hard to know what to say to a kid when they've had a really significant loss. Shout out to all those teachers who are stepping forward and being that adult for them during those really hard times. All right, you're fabulous. I'm going off to download a podcast, which I'm really excited to listen to. And I'm going to see you probably next week, Mr. White.
I'll be here. I'll be here. I get to see you tomorrow, Gilly. Woohoo!
Yay! All right, see you, legends.
See ya.
Bye.
Powered by Riverside.